If a city was a person, its metro would be the arteries that keep the person alive. This fact can be said for nearly every city, Prague included. I love the Prague metro. Within an hour, you can go from a station that looks like this to a station that looks like this. Such is the dynamism of the only underground rapid transit system in Czechia. Let's take a look at the history and future of the Prague metro. Okay, so the idea of a metro running underneath Prague actually dates back to before Czechoslovak independence, when Ladislav Rot submitted a proposal to the Prague City Council for the construction of a subsurface railway that would be built along with the city's sewer system that was already being worked on at the time. However, the city's council dismissed the idea, and it wasn't until the 1930s and 40s that the idea of some kind of underground rapid transit emerged again, with heavy project planning going on during this time. Before World War II, the Prague City Council considered two major solutions: a so-called pre-metro, an underground network of tram tunnels similar to the Stadtbahns now found in Dortmund, Germany and Brussels, Belgium, and a true metro, which would be a full-blown underground railway similar to the Berlin U-bahn. Due to the German occupation of Czechoslovakia and World War II, all planning for a Prague metro was stopped, with the idea only being revived in the early 1960s under communism. In 1967, the Prague metro was finally greenlit as an underground tramway, with the construction of the Hlavní nádraží station beginning in August of that year. Perhaps the only good thing that the Soviets did for Czechoslovakia during this time was to actually influence Prague to commit to building a full-blown Russian-style metro system, with the entire project for the Prague metro being transformed from the construction of a Stadtbahn-like network to a dedicated metro. So, the construction started on Metro Line C, with partially complete Hlavní nádraží station being repurposed for the metro. After 7 years of construction, the first portion of Line C opened between Florence, then known as Sokolovska, and Kačerov on May 9th, 1974. What I actually didn't know is that Line C actually runs in a tunnel underneath the Nuslé Bridge. So while the bridge is disgusting and carries a highway through the city center, it also does some good for transport in the city of Prague. Anyway, 4 years later, in August of 1978, the first segment of Line A between Náměstí Míru and Leninova was opened. It took until 1985 for the construction of the first segment of Line B to be completed, with the segment between Sokolovska and Smíchovské nádraží to be finished. Up until the fall of communism in 1989, a good portion of the stations in the metro were named after communist leaders, figures, companies, and places, such as the aforementioned Leninova and Sokolovska stops, along with the Moskevska, Kosmonautu, Mladežnická, and Dukelská stops. After the fall of communism in 1989, 13 stations were renamed to more Czech names. In 1998, having been extended to its current terminus at Černý Most, Line B was complete. The terminus at the other end of the line at Zličín was opened just a few years prior in 1994. As we enter the 2000s, we have to talk about the 2002 European floods. Basically, in August of 2002, large parts of Central Europe, including Prague, experienced record-high flood levels, and Prague, lying smack in the middle of the central Bohemian floodplain, experienced its worst flood since at least 1845. The resulting water damage caused a partial collapse of public transportation in the city, with the metro's anti-flood system almost completely failing, causing 19 stations to be flooded. The segments between Malostranska and Muzeum on Line A, Radlická and Vysočanská on Line B, and Nádraží Holešovice and Muzeum on Line C were all inundated with floodwaters ranging from a few centimeters all the way up to several meters in height. All in all, it costed $225 million to repair the damage from the flood, with the last affected station, Křižíková, opening 7 months after it was flooded. It's kind of hard to believe that this was the state of the metro in 2002. Looks like something straight out of Half-Life or Metro 2033. Anyway, despite these watery setbacks, Line C was completed just 6 years later in 2008 with the Letňany extension. Meanwhile, Line A was finished last in 2015, with the Dejvická to Nemocnice Motol extension being complete. As you can see, because the construction of the Prague Metro spans quite a few decades, the metro has become one of the most contrasting in Central Europe. Some stations, such as Nádraží Holešovice and Kačerov, look grimy and dystopian with their old Soviet-like architecture, while other stations, such as Stříškov, look beautiful, rather futuristic and modern, and they also let natural light in. Since 2015, the Prague Metro has looked like this, covering a good portion of Prague city proper and the Prague region, with stops such as Letňany being in the literal middle of nowhere. Now, I've discussed this in my Brno trams video, but essentially the reason for Letňany's strange location is primarily because it was an attempt to spur development around the metro stop, which hasn't really happened yet. Essentially, Letňany, right now at least, primarily acts as a metro and bus transfer center near a highway. The nearest settlement from Letňany, besides an expo center, is Nové Letňany, which is nearly a kilometer away. In a similar manner to other metro systems around Central and Eastern Europe, the farther you get away from the city center in Prague, the more shallow the metro tunnels get, with some stations such as Stříškov and Ladvie on line C and Hurka on line B lying just a few meters below the ground. Meanwhile, near the city center, stops such as Náměstí Míru on line A lie so far underground, around 50 meters, that the station doubles as a nuclear bomb and fallout shelter. Also, Náměstí Míru, funnily enough, is the station that I use the most when I'm in Prague. Now it's time to talk rolling stock. Originally, these prototype cars were meant to operate on the Prague Metro, made by ČKD Tatra in the late 1960s. Thankfully though, this monstrosity never made it past the prototyping phase. Anyway, from the inauguration of the metro in 1974 up until 1997, Line C was operated by Soviet etched trains. On lines A and B, Metro Vagonmash 8171s were used up until 2009. In the 2000s, the Class 8171s were revamped into the 8171M by Škoda and ČKD, and Line C's old etch units were replaced with rather unique Metro M1s starting in 2000. Essentially, the Metro M1 was an attempt by ČKD Praha, Siemens, and AD Trans to make a uniquely Czech train, and I guess you could say it worked? I mean, considering the fact that Line C is exclusively operated with 265 M1 cars, and the fact that the Maracaibo Metro in Venezuela uses modified units of the M1, its production could be considered a success. So, what does the future of the Prague Metro hold? Well, currently, there's a fourth line, the Line D, under construction since 2022. Line D will serve the south of the Prague city and region, which is quite underserved by tram services. The line will run from Náměstí Míru on Line A to a new terminus at Depot Písnice via Náměstí Bratří Sinků, Pankrác, Olbrachtova, Nádraží Krč, Nemocnice Krč, Nové Dvory, Libuš, and Písnice. At Pankrác, passengers will be able to transfer to Line C, and at Nádraží Krč to ESCO and local train services. What makes this line even sweeter is the fact that it will be operated by entirely automated driverless trains, with DPP having last year signed an agreement for 16 train units. As part of this agreement, Line C will also be partially automated with 59 trains, although I'm not sure if the M1 trains will be automated and used, or if DPP will be purchasing new train units. Now, I personally like Line D because it's going to spur development in the south of the Prague region, and it just looks so cool, at least in the renderings. What could also potentially be in store for the metro in the future, although it's currently not planned, is a circular line around the outskirts of Prague, similar to the Pražský okruh highway. This suggested Line E would connect some stations of the 4 metro lines in one big oval loop, which would definitely help with overcrowding at the 3 transfer stations between the metro lines at Muzeum, Florence, and Můstek. It would also allow passengers coming off Line D to more easily access other parts of the city, rather than having to go into Prague city center, then back out again.